It's 2026 and it feels like the land investing information out there is getting a little stale. So I thought I would create this video. It's going to be probably pretty long here because I'm going to dive into land investing in 2026. What do things look like? What's working? What isn't? How should we think about things? And the purpose of this video is to walk you through the complete framework of how I think about land investing. Because the thing is I can give you these little tips and tricks. And if there's something you want me to spend a little bit more time on digging into later, I can do that. But it's more important to get the overarching framework of how we think about things because we're going to constantly be looking for new edges in this business, as in everything that you do in real estate. You have to constantly be shifting, constantly pivoting, looking at what's working, what's changed, what's broken, and adapting all the time. So, first, let's talk about land investing in 2026, generally speaking. Can you still be a land investor in 2026 and have a complete business just doing that? The answer is absolutely yes. However, I would say we've shifted pretty drastically from this old guru model. Now, it used to be that most of the courses out there would have you investing in really, really small parcels, these kind of desert squares, or what we affectionately call them now. This is kind of junk land in the middle of nowhere that nobody actually wants. And you go and you get this for really, really cheap because people are tired of paying on it, or they never go to it, or they couldn't sell it. You get it for 20, 30, 40 cents on the dollar, and then you turn around and you sell it on owner finance or cash if you can do it. However, the market is flooded with these. They are everywhere. Unless you do really, really good marketing, it's hard to get those moved. People are constantly defaulting. And that leads to the second problem with kind of this old school model is just the ethics of it. If you are selling something to somebody that's kind of junk anyway, to someone who you think is going to default, there's a bit of an ethical conundrum there of why are you selling something to somebody if you know they're going to default or have a high suspicion that they will. Some people have a problem with that. Some people don't. I'm just stating it is what it is. Okay, so that is not the only way to get into the land business, but that's how a lot of it started. And I don't want to throw shade at these people. I think that if you get into a room of successful land investors today, there's probably a lot of people that came out of that and are in the space that they are now doing well. And it was a great introduction and a way to introduce people into the space in general. But most people move pretty quickly out of that. And so I don't want people to think that is all land investing is. Really, I think of land investing kind of as a spectrum. You think of like a horizontal line. That might be the very beginning, the entry of where a lot of people start, but it's certainly not where most people end up, especially if you want to do this long term. The volume that would have to happen in order for you to stick around in this business and do those kinds of deals would have to be massive, which means hiring VAs, which means mass marketing at a scale that's insane, and all these systems and processes that get built out. And you have all this overhead and it becomes a mess. Lots of defaults, lots of reselling. It's unfortunate that a lot of people really dig in and they think that's what land investing is. Okay. So on one end of the spectrum of land investing, you do have those. You have these low end properties kind of in junky areas and you 99 down and $99 a month type sales stuff. You have that. Now, as you continue along that kind of horizontal axis, you get into little bigger flips, same kind of marketing, maybe you sending direct mail, texting. I'll talk about all this a little bit later in this video, but you have a little bit larger flips. Okay, and then you get it to high quality property. This is what I would refer to as like A grade or B grade type property. This is nice properties, good attributes, little higher price range. And I think a lot of people can build a business out of these parcels alone. You can have a business buying something for 20, selling it for 30 or 40 and do pretty well. Now you can go from there and get into even higher end flips. Maybe it's something at, you're buying at 100,000 and you're trying to sell at 150 or 200,000. I do want to make note here that in this business, a lot of what's been advertised is this 100, 200, 300% returns. And yes, that stuff is still possible. Depends on what kind of game you want to play. And again, I'll get into this in the marketing piece of this video. Again, right now, I just want to paint a picture of what is in the land investing space, what's possible, and where people fall on the spectrum. So you kind of have the lower end properties. You can do tax deed properties, tax auction type properties where, somebody defaulted and now you're getting it from the state. You can do lower end flips, higher end flips, and then you start getting into the more complex stuff. So you have maybe simple subdivides. These are areas where maybe you can do a survey and cut up a parcel as long as you have enough road frontage. You get to more complex subdivides even further down that line. This is maybe putting in like a cul-de-sac or a road or making improvements. And maybe there's some kind of process to go through here, some kind of platting process where you have to go through, commissioner court or planning and zoning if you're in city limits, that sort of thing. And then the furthest end of this to me is probably the entitlement space. This is pretty complicated, bigger paydays, but way longer time frames. Could take 8-9 months minimum. A lot of these are more like a year or two to get through that entire process. These are the people who are doing 100 to 500 lot subdivisions, selling to like a D.R. Horton or LGI or Lennar or somebody like that. So you can fall anywhere along that line. You can make a business out of this. Now, let's get into what is actually working today. So yes, you can still do the does your square thing if you really want to. I think that's gotten really, really complicated. I think it's unnecessarily complicated, I guess I should say. You are filling your inventory with junk, and junk can be hard to sell. You're going to have high default rates. You're going to have some major problems if that is your business model. So we see a lot of people get started there and they shift pretty quickly out of it. And where most people have landed is more of like this smaller to medium size flip, and then starting to get into maybe some of the subdivide things. And really, my business followed a similar trajectory. I started off with smaller flips, just buy it, $100, $200, $300, sell at $1,000, maybe sell some of those on owner finance. But it didn't take me long before I realized that I was going to have to sell hundreds and hundreds of these properties to make the kind of income that I was wanting to make. It was about that time that I heard guys like Justin Slevo at the Casual Fridays REI and Seth Williams talking about doing bigger deals. And I was like, great, I'll just go do that. And it was really the first proof of concept I got was here in DFW. I bought a lot from somebody that they had bought 2 years previously for about $12,500. I bought it for $25,000. We put it on the market. We sell it at $65,000. And I got to walk away with a pretty healthy check by the time all the splits and everything came out. That was kind of my first realization that this business can work, and it can work with bigger and better deals and bigger and better properties. And if you talk to successful land people today, the ones that have been around several years, I think that's the shift that most people make. They get into just better assets. You don't want to buy the junk. You want to buy stuff that people actually want. So in order to do that, you have to figure out where to go, how to market to them, how to acquire, and then how to sell. And those are really the main steps, no matter what kind of land you're talking about and what you want to do. Whether you want to do the full entitlement, you want to do simple subdivides, you want to do more complex subdivides, you want to do the larger flips, the smaller flips, whatever it is, that is a basic framework that I deploy. It starts with research. Where do you want to go? And there's lots of different ways to measure this. And guys, the tools have gotten better and better. I'll mention a few here. Just know that they change all the time. There's new stuff coming out. But places like Priced, PRYCD.com, you have places like Land Insights, like Land Portal. You have all these different places nowadays that you can dive into the research side and figure out whatever's important to you. Is it, maybe it's sell-through rate in an area, maybe it's population growth, maybe you only want to go after certain size parcels because those are what's hot in that market, right? So you start off with the research. You got to figure out where to go, what's important for that area that you're in. Maybe if you were looking at the subdivide side of this, part of that research would be figuring out where can you do the subdivide thing relatively easily or at least straightforward. Not every place has what are called state exemptions, which is where the state allows you by rule of law to survey and be done as long as you meet their criteria. Again, some places are more complex. Some places require public hearings. It depends if you're inside city limits or outside. A lot of this will come into your research of figuring out where you want to be. Okay, so maybe you're looking at things like sell-through rates and population growth. The next side of this, so that's your research side. The next side is going to be the data side, and that's getting the actual owner information. Okay, again, this software stack has gotten better and better, especially over the last several years. So places like Priced and Land Portal and Land Insights are all available out there. You also have places like Lightbox where you can pull stuff from. You can also do this old school. Well, I say old school. It's not that old school. It's old school for people who are not using this modern kind of AI software, but all this information, all these owners' information is public. You can go to the county and look at their GIS maps for free and go grab them. In fact, I know people who still make a living with almost no tech stack at all. They will just go to the county GIS, pull stuff up, look at parcels they'd actually want, and grab those owners' information and build a list to start marketing to them. So you can go build that list. Now, modern tools with Land Insights and Land Portal, for example, you might be able to scrub out some of these owners, right? If you're in a county and let's say that you want to go after 20-acre lots and less, you can go plug that in there. It'll pull a massive list in that county for you. Then you can even have it scrub and get rid of things like too much wetlands or too much flood zone or road frontage maybe is landlocked, that sort of thing. So this has gotten easier and easier and easier to go do and to clean up, and this will save you money on the next piece, which is the marketing piece. But research, then data, go grab the data for all the parcels that you want. Now, the next step, step 3, would be marketing. And I'm going to spend maybe a little bit of time here breaking this down because there seems to be this animosity for people doing one type of marketing versus the other. And the reality is all marketing works. You spend enough money, you put enough volume out there, every marketing strategy can work. I think people need to fundamentally ask a different question. And the different question is, would this style of marketing work for the type of business that I want? And maybe you don't know the type of business that you want, so I would encourage you to spend some time thinking about that. But if we're comparing texting versus cold calling versus neutral mailer versus blind offer mailer versus range offer letter, those all look a little bit different. They usually, the person that responds to these different types of marketing is a different type of avatar. The person who responds to a text probably doesn't want to be on the phone with you, or they wouldn't have responded to the letter because they think that's junk and they're going to throw it out. But they might respond to a text because there's a distance from the person that they're talking to and it's not as personal. Versus some people, especially on the bigger deals that I do, for example, people want to be on the phone. There needs to be trust established. They want to know the other person on the other end of the phone is human being and they can make a connection and we can build that trust there. I think we've won a lot of deals that maybe other people would have missed because we get on the phone and we talk with people and we're honest and we're transparent and they get to meet, me on the phone. So all these different methods work. It's just a matter of what you want your business to look like. Now, let me talk about some of the pros and cons for some of these different marketing strategies. There's been a big push into the texting space recently, and there's a lot of compliance things that you're going to have to worry about if you go with the texting routes. And let me be clear, I'm going to talk about pros and cons about everything. So don't feel like I'm just talking negative about all the ones I don't like and then positively about the ones that I do. I'm going to give you the pros and cons of everything. So when it comes to texting, number one issue that I had or that you should consider, it's going to become a massive machine. Okay, if you're texting, let's say 100 people a day, you're going to start texting 100 on Monday, 100 on Tuesday, Wednesday, you can continue that through. Let's say that you're only doing it 5 days a week, so 500 texts a week. Well, people are going to start responding. They're going to respond staggered, meaning some people are going to respond to the first 100 on the Tuesday, but you send out a new 100. And so you're basically going to need a full-time person to be running that machine because it's going to get massively, massively out of control very quickly. Now, there's lots of software out there, whether it's REI Reply or Launch Control or all these different things to do it, but understand the scale that comes with that. It gets pretty drastic pretty quick. And if somebody's not managing it, staying on top of it, you're going to get overwhelmed very, very quickly. Now, one of the pros of this is that texting is relatively cheap. You can send it for a penny, maybe even sub-penny in some places using Twilio, some of these other connections. So you can get a bunch of stuff out there for relatively cheap. However, it's going to take lots and lots and lots, thousands and thousands and thousands of text messages, thousands and thousands of active conversations going on to get deals done and continue to drip and to follow up and do all that. I'm just telling you right now, some people can't handle that volume. Some people don't want to handle that volume. And to which I'd say, great, you know that this is not for you. If you're really good at hiring or you want to outsource this, I don't have experience with this, but I know Launch Control and there's several other service providers out there that will handle all that piece for you and then just take the leads and go drop them in your CRM or Google Sheet or wherever you want. So if you like the idea of that, but not the idea of building this massive machine and having to hire and track and do all that, there are options. And there's usually options for all of this, by the way. If you want more turnkey, white glove type stuff, that's usually available for any of the marketing I'm going to be talking about. Now, one of the other concerns with texting is a constant changing of compliance and what's legal and what's not, and not getting stuck in spam filters. So you have to be really, really careful with this to make sure you are up to date with whatever the laws are, whatever platform you're using is helping keep you safe and in compliance. There are people whose sole job is to be a litigator and to try to get you to text lists that you shouldn't be. And every text message that they get or every response, they're going to end up bringing a lawsuit and can bring pretty massive lawsuit to try to take you out. So always make sure you're within compliance, and not just within texting, but within everything that you do. You don't want a lawsuit. You don't want to have to go through that. Even if you did nothing wrong, the time, energy, and capital that it can suck up can be pretty drastic. All right. So that's texting. Let's talk about cold calling. Again, each of these is going to have a different avatar. So cold calling seemed to work well for me for larger deals, more sophisticated owners, larger ranches, that sort of thing. And I think the reason that is done well for me is the connection that you can make over the phone. You can have a normal conversation. You're an actual person. You do business in the area. You can point to other deals. You typically, like, I'm going to know the broker in the area. And so you can make some connection and build a little bit of a bond there and build trust, which is really important in any transaction. Now, I didn't want to build out this massive cold calling internal team. But keep in mind that if you want to do this and be the most cost effective, you would have to get a dialer and a system, probably buy a few numbers and hire some people to do that cold calling. Because cold calling is usually like a 2 to 3 call type close, maybe even more on the more sophisticated or complex deal. So you really need someone to be making initial contact, and then typically someone to then go through the actual property details with the person and then discuss price and then eventually try to close that deal. So what I've done is I've actually separated out. Again, most of these you can buy a turnkey service. I typically pay a service for the cold calling, and then they bring my leads in, and then my team then calls and connects with the actual sellers that were interested in selling and raise their hand. Said, yeah, I would consider selling. Let me talk to somebody over there. We'll see if we can figure something out. So if you don't want to build the internal team, services are out there. There's plenty. They constantly change on who's good, so I'm not going to recommend one right now. I've tried different services. Sometimes they're good at the beginning. Sometimes they start to fizzle out a little. But there are plenty out there to go and find and to pick from. Really, you have to decide when you're picking a servicer, do you want to go direct to a call center that's doing this, or do you want some kind of middleman? In the land space, there tends to be a lot of these middlemen where they will go to the call center anyway, whether it's in Egypt or Belize or wherever it is, and then sell you a service and add a fee on top of it, and then go to the call center that you could have gone to direct anyway. There's some things that maybe they do that you won't have to, these middlemen, when you do it that way, as far as training and quality assurance and that sort of thing, and staying on top of the call center. But your other option would be good. You do some of that and you can go direct to the call center. They hire, they train, they have some of that built in, but you may have to be a little bit more of a task driver to get things done the way that you want. All right, so that's cold calling. Typically, also the costs associated with this, it's, you normally will provide the list. Sometimes they can pull the list for you, but there's got to be skip tracing somewhere. So you might have to incur a little bit of skip tracing cost, whether you do it personally or you hand it off to them to do. But skip tracing is relatively cheap, anywhere from, I've seen as low as a penny up to 3, 4, 5 cents a skip trace. If you are doing very low volume, maybe you don't have access to that kind of discount. You might be more in the 9 to 10 cent range. If you're doing that, I would hope that whatever you're calling or texting, if you're getting charged that much for skip tracing, that it's a very concentrated kind of high quality list, and that you're not just doing that for everything across the board. All right. So next is the more tried and true method of marketing that we've seen, which is mail. And within mail, you really have 3 or 4 different options. I'll start off with a small one, which is just a postcard. So you can send a postcard, say I'm interested in buying your property. There's some pretty interesting designs out there. You have rocket print mail, or I know like the Pebble CRM system can do some of this too, where it might stick like a GPS pin and take a picture of the general area and say I'm interested in buying this property, and you send them a post. Usually it doesn't have a price attached to it. It's kind of neutral, and the idea is you just drive people calling you. I'd say that's practiced probably a little bit less than these other 3 models, which are, the typical mailer envelope, double window business envelope, or the single solid envelope with a stamp. Those are probably the 2 most common. There's been some pretty interesting businesses that have come out over the last few years. Ones that can make the address and the person you're writing to actually handwritten, whether it's a robot or with print that looks handwritten. It's kind of interesting to see all those different things played out. I don't have numbers for you to compare, hey, this one does better than that one. It seems to me that if you do enough volume, it all about evens out. I'm sure there's going to be certain times where one of these will outperform the other, but you need to test and do this yourself, because what you're marketing and who you're marketing to can be very different than the guy next to you feeding you his numbers. So I would suggest that you look at your own data at the end of every year and then make decisions based off of it. So the 3 main true mailer templates that we see are blind offer. So that's like a set price per property that you came up with. And the issue that you'll run into here is that you have to price every property. Some of it's going to be good, some of it's going to be bad. These tools have gotten better, whether it's Priced or Land Insights or Land Portal, that can try to price them beforehand. But they're not perfect. They're only as good as the data that are fed into them. So if you're in an area that has a little less data, or maybe something like a mobile home got recorded as a land sale, then it could skew things one side or the other. Or maybe you're, let's say, waterfront on a river or a lake or the ocean versus inland. Well, it has a hard time separating that out. And so what can happen is if you take an average price, for example, and you're sending out blind offers, you can run into an issue where all of your inland stuff is too high and then all your waterfront stuff is too low and you get no deals. So that comes with its own set of complications of getting your pricing good enough to send out. You have kind of, which I think led to the next example, which would be that ranged offer. They give somewhere, you can do this by percentage or however you want to do it. But let's say that somebody is offering between 45 and 65% of market value. They would stick that range in there and just say, hey, we're buying between this range and this range, and then send it out. So the idea there would be that maybe someone that got turned off by such a low offer on the blind offer might respond to that one because there's a higher range that you can go up to. And if it's a good enough property, then maybe you're good with making that return. Now, the last is a neutral letter. It just says, hey, I'm interested in buying your property, buy stuff in your area, whatever you want to do to build trust. Maybe it's a photo of you, maybe it's not. Give me a call. And then you get inbound leads and you handle all those. What's going to happen here, and what's interesting about this one, is you're going to end up with a bunch of stuff where people are kind of more tire kickers probably and are just interested in what price you're actually offering, but not actually in selling. So you'll have to deal with that. But if you're really good on the phone or if you have good salespeople, you might get a deal out of that you might otherwise not have because the price that you would have sent out wouldn't have gone well. So those are the three kind of mailing pieces that I see consistently. And the old school method or like guru method would have been sending that blind offer. Now, a few other things to consider. There's a lot of strategy you can employ in all of these different things, meaning maybe you're looking at flips and subdivides. Flips can be priced at one thing. Subdivides can be priced higher, even though it's the same acre size, because you know that you can force appreciation, get the return you want from that side. So as you build out your systems, your process, your strategy, just understand that each of these has room for you to be creative with what you're going after and to be quote unquote optimized. There is no one right way. All of this works. Part of my frustration with this space is these gurus who constantly point you to other things that they do in the ecosystem rather than helping improve the overall marketing strategy. And so what some of these guys will say is, oh, well, you didn't get as many deals because, you need to just send more mail. Oh, by the way, here's my mail house. Only use this. And they get paid on that side. And it's not that, there's not value there. They've brought a solution to the problem. But, if your only solution is only ever the things that make you money also, I start to wonder about conflict of interest there. So just keep that in mind as you do your marketing and you figure out which piece you want, what you want your team to look like, all of those things. Any of this marketing can work. It just matters what's right for you. So far we've have the research, we have the data, we have the marketing. Now stuff is going to come in. Let's talk about acquisition. So you're going to have to close these deals. Now, how do you do this? Is everyone just sitting around with $1 million in the bank and closing everything cash? The answer is no. That's obviously not happening. And most people actually use other people's money. There's plenty of land funders out there. If you can find a good deal, you can probably find funding. Now, this funding, especially at the beginning, may be more expensive than you'd like, but it's more than you making $0 on a deal because you didn't have the capital. So you'll see deal funders wanting anywhere from 20% on the money to 20% equity to 50% equity. You'll see this massive spread in what they charge for the deal, but it allows you to go and scale and use other people's money to get these deals, get them on the market and get them moving. I'm not going to recommend any one specific lender here because everybody's rates and contracts change all the time. And so what I would say is spend some time talking to someone else who is in this business and see where they're getting their money. Normally over time, this shifts and you end up kind of building your own network of people for cheaper money over time. But at the beginning, you may have to go with the guy who's going to ask for 50% equity because he's going to put up all the capital and help you through the sales side. You can get one or two of these under your belt and then you can kind of move forward. Now this gets, maybe a little bit more complicated with subdivides and that sort of thing, just because you're going to be cutting up parcels. And so can you release that without a lien? so that the person buying it has it free and clear. We call that a partial release. So can you do that? Or do they allow that or not? So these are all things that we look at on the acquisition side. But you need to have your contract signed. I do everything through title. I'd rather have title insurance. I've only had one, thank goodness, major mistake made by a closing attorney, in which case they actually ended up solving the problem for us without having to use title insurance. But it's good to have. To me, it's a safety net that if something was ever missed on their end, that I can go in and claim that insurance and get some money back. So I always go through title. You need to check, they're going to check things like chain of ownership all the way back to the beginning of time. States like, certain southern states require an abstract, or you can just do chain of title over a certain amount of owners, but that's all done at the title company or the closing attorney level, depending on where you're at. Meaning some states do it the opposite of the others. So some will be, you'll have the title company and then you'll have the attorney that works under or for the title company. And then in other places you have it reversed. You have a closing attorney and then they go to the title company to get all the title work done, but they handle the close. So different depending on where you go, but acquisition wise, once you have it, you're right, you've gotten your money from wherever you're getting your money from, you've acquired it. Now you have the disposition side of this, which is sales side. And really you have a wide spectrum here as well. You have some people that are doing it themselves. They're sending out a drone person to take pictures and then putting it on for sale by owner and all these Facebook groups and trying to move stuff. And I think for cheaper stuff, that may be a good option. That gets to be a little bit harder with larger stuff. You're just not going to find, a $500,000 buyer necessarily on Facebook versus it being listed at every place humanly possible and brokers actually taking phone calls. So I'll tell you that my business, for example, is almost entirely broker-centric. So I find stud brokers in each area that can move my properties really well, show well, have good connections, maybe even know like the county commissioners and know what they like and what they don't like to see, know that area really well, know what people are wanting to buy, and can help me, go on the acquisition side, even maybe go and walk the property before I buy it, look out for any gotchas, that sort of thing. All right. So figure out your dispo side. There's lots of different ways, again, to do this. Some people, you can deploy different strategies here. So some people will send neighbor letters, for example, to sell something to one of the neighbors without having to list. Some people will go brokerless, which is a website where you can, it's actually kind of funny because it's still through a broker, but a broker allows you to list through their stuff and then you handle all the inbound calls and marketing, everything that goes with it. They just use their license to post to different places for you. Or you can go the full-blown broker route and have them handle it. Now, I will say, a lot of the pushback that you'll probably get about the broker or realtor side of this is that, candidly, most realtors suck. And of the ones that are good, a lot of them aren't good at land. So I would find a land-specific realtor who's absolutely crushing it. Again, luckily with tools like Priced and Land Insights and Land Portal, they can even show you which brokerages or which individual realtors or brokers have sold the most. So you can start there. I think the old adage used to be you would go to whatever mossy oak or whitetail guy was in the area for these kind of hunting track type stuff. But I think good agents are everywhere. I have some guys who work at a Compass. I have some guys who work at Keller Williams. I have some guys who work at whitetail or mossy oak. It's less business centric to me and more about what they're actually doing wherever that they are. And as long as they have good support and can help me get through my deals, that's what I care about. And that essentially is it. I mean, the framework is all there, right? It's research, data, acquisition, disposition. Oh, sorry, I forgot marketing in there. It's research, data, marketing, acquisition, disposition. So your 5 main points. And those things will shift all the time, which leads me to my next main point, that you should constantly be looking for an edge. There's ways to look at data that other people aren't. And as technology has progressed, ironically, I think it's pushed a lot of people into the same spaces, meaning in the past where a lot of this had to be done more manually, you might have had an edge by being in certain markets that you analyzed the data and you went through more amounts of data than anybody else. And so maybe you were in a spot in North Carolina or Georgia or wherever that less people were in because they didn't have access to the data or weren't willing to go get it like you were. And today, a lot of that has gone away. The ability to mass import data, to use AI to go through and clean and scrape and cut out the stuff that you don't want, to go after what you do, it is more accessible than ever. So what has happened is a lot of people now are all marketing to the same places because those software companies have come along and said, hey, here's what a good market looks like, right? And they might have 4 or 5 points. Maybe that's a sell-through rate over 100%. and a growth rate of this, and you only target these types of people, out of state owners, and you only do this, this is. So a lot of these gurus, these courses, and even the software themselves might make recommendations. And so I think what is starting to happen, especially with the advent of AI and this becoming more and more prevalent, is that you're starting to get way more people competing in the same little pockets than it used to have. So we need to find an edge. So how do you do that? Well, you actually have to use your brain and you have to think about, okay, if everyone is here, what are areas that they're not hitting and why? Where can I get into that maybe has a little bit less competition? Where can I get to that maybe somebody hasn't thought about? And on the subdivide side, this is going to open up all kinds of doors because there are certain metrics you can look at subdivide that other people can, and they just aren't considering because they're just looking at single parcel flip type stuff, right? So you can consistently do research to find that edge. You can use the data in ways that these platforms don't. And I want to be really careful here because I don't want to ruin anybody's kind of strategy they have going now. But you can compare, I'll give you an example, 5 acres versus 10-acre lots. Where's an area where the spread is between a 10 and a 5 or a 10 and a 2 or a 10 and a 1. Okay, well, maybe now you can go and target those areas. Maybe there's certain areas where the subdivide rules are really good and where you can just cut stuff up. Texas is a good example of this. You're going to see this price in a lot of the markets here. It's not necessarily a strong market to be in right now, but in Texas, if you have the right road frontage and you're outside city limits, you can cut 10-acre tracts all day long as you have the proper road frontage with just a survey and be done. And so there's kind of low-hanging fruit, and then there's more complex stuff you can be looking at that maybe other people don't consider because they don't know the process, right? Maybe it's a platting process and you become the master of that place and that process, and nobody else wants to bother because it's not low enough hanging fruit. So I guess my point is this: be thinking about all these different ways that you can apply an edge because you're going to have to continuously do that throughout your career in this business. I've had to. And you're also going to see this edge disappear in your results. And I think a lot of people that you're hearing say, land is dead, mailers don't work anymore. Well, is it dead, or is it possible that you're targeting all the same places, or there's just more people in the space? And it's not that it doesn't work, but maybe it doesn't work to the same degree, or maybe you need to differentiate your marketing just a little bit. Maybe it's a different letter, maybe that's a picture on it, maybe it's all these different things that we need to be testing all the time. Because it used to be, and it's not just not this way anymore, that you could send a few hundred letters and you can go get a deal. And that very quickly became, I started in 2020 doing this, and one of my first mailers was like 300. And I got several deals out of that. And then as I got into the bigger things, it was more like, I send 1,100 or 1,800 in the case of DFW, and I got 3 deals out of that. And now it's more like 4, 5, 6 for some people, maybe even up to 10,000 or more, depending on what you're targeting, right? These all have different response rates. Different types of owners respond to different types of media, meaning mail versus cold calling versus texting versus postcard, all these different things. Social media ads, by the way, is one that I forgot to mention for marketing. People running Facebook ads or Google ads. I think pretty soon you're going to have AI citation. So having SEO maybe on your website that AI can go and find and cite for people looking who go to Claude or ChatGPT and type in sell my land quickly, Texas or Florida or whatever. And those AI can go, yeah, hey, here's a guy you can go check out. He'll buy land and has good reviews and all the things. So that'll become another path forward. SEO in general could be a path forward for some people in driving natural inbound leads. I knew a guy who tried the TV ads route, webinars. There's all kinds of different ways to do this. Just be aware that these things shift over time. And just because it takes more of something doesn't mean it's not working. It just may be time to shift, or where I think things are headed, and land is antiquated in this way, is it's probably going to take some kind of marketing stack. It used to be very marketing centric, like one piece. Everyone would go, hey, I'm just going to do mail. I'm just going to do texting. I'm just going to do cold calling. Now, land is not my first business, but it's the only business that when I look at, everyone tends to preach and practice one form of media, one form of marketing, and that's it. And it's strange to me because any other business doesn't do it that way. And it's Tim Kennedy and then Russell Brunson and all these other marketers have talked about the fact that the guy who can spend more on marketing ends up getting the lead. But it doesn't have to be more in the sense of you need to send 1 million mailers a year. It could be spread out between 3 or 4 different forms of media so that you're hitting somebody at every level of the funnel or media that person consumes, so they find the format that they would actually respond. So that might look something like You send them a letter and then you cold call them and then you send them a text and then you send them a postcard and then you follow up with another letter. So this multi-level marketing is not really happening right now, not at scale, not by most people. So that's probably, you're talking about edges. I think that's where a lot of this business is headed. And if you're not doing that now, you probably will be in the near future. There's a lot of these CRMs, whether it's Stride or Pebble or Carrot or any of these other CRMs, go high level. They're starting to integrate this stuff more often. So you're starting to see drip campaigns going for you, more automations because of AI. And you're starting to get that built into these CRMs that you maybe didn't have that necessarily before, or was just a really big pain in the butt or super expensive to set up in the past. So constantly be looking for edges. Things change all the time. Always be testing different concepts and ideas. Guys, this stuff changes so quickly, which is why I'm hesitant to give recommendations on this software or that software. It changes so quickly that I'm afraid that if I do a video about one specific thing, that by next week it could be gone. AI, especially when we talk about the tools that we use in AI and how I'm implementing Claude and how it's building software stacks for us and how I'm using it in marketing. And for that reason, I will probably never sell a course. I would rather not even sell. I'd rather just give the framework to you guys and you guys go and you figure out how it applies to your business and you apply critical thinking to your business. And I just give you the framework to think about. Now, these things change all the time. And if you want to stay up to date with them, I do have a paid community that I'm in. And the idea for the community was really simple. I didn't want to create a course because things change too often. I'd be honest, I wouldn't go back and update it. Courses have gotten outrageously expensive. There's some courses that I've seen that are 10, 20, 50. There's a land course out there. It's $100,000 to $150,000. I think that's outrageous. I am doing this business every day. I'm constantly adapting. I'm constantly thinking through edges. And so I just was like, well, let's create a community where people are doing this together. So I created a Discord community called the Land Investors Coalition. Not a hard sell here for you. Just if working and hearing these things is helpful and working along someone like me would be helpful, I literally live stream as I work in there. And I answer questions and I help people go through their deals and come up with ways to think about how to deploy their marketing and what's working and what isn't. And that way you can kind of be up to date. You can watch me go into Claude Live and tinker with the tool that I'm building or underwrite a deal or go and figure out how long it's going to take me to dispo through a property. Look for, problems in a subdivide. See how I'm adapting my marketing. See what other people are doing live in there. Maybe you guys want to collaborate and you guys do a deal together in there. Maybe you need help implementing AI in your business. I do that all in there. It's super affordable. I think it's $100 a month. I don't think you'll find a better deal of operators actually operating. And I don't want it to be big. So if you're looking for some massive community of 1,000+ people, that's not my intent. My intent is to have a small, tight-knit group of people who are actually doing the business in there, running and gunning, constantly innovating, constantly creating, constantly doing deals. So if that sounds like a good fit for you, awesome. Would love to have you. If not, no worries. I'm going to provide so much free info and content on the YouTube channel that honestly you could run with the things hopefully that I say, and you could run your own business. And one day, just shoot me a message and let me know if this has been helpful for you. All right, guys, that's all I got for now. That is land investing in a nutshell in 2026. I hope this has been insightful. I hope this has been helpful for you. I will see you next time.